Paulo Figueiredo says that Damares has become a feminist activist and talks about the deep split within Bolsonarism. The former family minister from the Bolsonaro government has become the target of attacks from the Bolsonarist online crowd. Why Andrea Gonçalves? Because she stepped in to defend Michele. Then they went all out attacking Damares Alves, who is also evangelical. Then to make things even worse, look at this. They said she's the pastor's lover. Oh my goodness. Exchange of messages on X. Damares and Oswaldo trade barbs. Damares, talked about Paulo Figueiredo and all that. She said, hello, Paulo Figueiredo. Nice to meet you. I'm Senator Damares. I don't think you know me. Let me introduce myself better. I'm that woman who stands up to pedophiles, to the corrupt, to organized crime head on without fear. I'm that woman who walks the streets in the communities and bam, 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 bam. Then Oswaldo came to defend Paulo Figueiredo and attack her. And all of this because she's defending Michele Bolsonaro. Then Oswaldo says, Damares, that's a lie. Actually, you're the lover of a married pastor from Recanto das Semas in Brasilia and one of the biggest feminists in Brazil. Are you up for a live stream with me? Your employee, Marco Carvalho. Your employee, Marco Carvalho, was stealing from the collection box. From the Baptist Church in Philadelphia in Guará. Oh, dear Jesus, there are only classy people here. It's the pot calling the kettle black. And all in the name of Jesus. Don't bring Jesus into this, no. Don't bring Jesus into this, no. Jesus has nothing to do with this. So they're fighting each other in every possible way. And all of this, I'll repeat, is because Damares stepped in to defend Michele. Then the attack dogs of Eduardo Bolsonaro and Flávio Bolsonaro went after Damares. Yeah, go mess with those people. They're sexist, misogynistic, and homophobic. Yeah, go ahead. That's what happens. They'll come after you all until the end. What do I think? I think they deserve worse. We need to have some shame and know who we hang out with and who we ally ourselves with. Yeah. So look, notice that evil destroys itself. And we help because we show what's really going on. But it's chaos breaking out in every possible way here among these people. And I don't feel sorry. No. I think, you know what I think? I think they deserve worse. Meanwhile, things went wrong. Marco Rubio keeps tariffs and ignores Flávio Bolsonaro's appeal. Flávio Bolsonaro, guys, was humiliated by Marco Rubio. He was humiliated. Flávio lowered his head, bent over for the United States, and even so, the United States didn't want to grant his request to lower the tariffs. A horrible thing, So Flávio is just messing up, making one blunder after another on the United States issue, and he ends up getting the label of traitor to the country. Just like Eduardo Bolsonaro, he messes up by attacking Michele, and Michele fought back. So that's the whole situation, and most importantly, his involvement with Daniel Vorka's mafia. Look here, it even came out in that awful thing. About this whole situation here, pay attention, my dear. Pay attention, like the live stream. The issue of the investigation to this whole situation here.
Look, pay attention, my dear, pay attention. To be practical, Natus, the expectation is that 3 lines of investigation will be opened. We prepared a screen here showing what these 3 lines will be. The first one is to investigate the transfers of 61 million made by Daniel Vorcaro, former owner of Master, at the request of Flávio Bolsonaro. The second is to investigate a possible allocation of part of the funds to bankroll Eduardo Bolsonaro in the United States. The third one aims to investigate the allocation of budget earmarks to entities linked to the film's production company. This information comes from G1 reporter Reynaldo Turolo, who says that these 3 investigations are expected to be opened in the coming days by the federal police. Speaking first about this investigation that aims to find out whether Eduardo Bolsonaro was funded in the United States, investigators see this as a somewhat more complex case because it requires a certain level of cooperation from American authorities. For example, when it comes to lifting confidentiality protections involving people who are in the United States, that's why it would be a bit more complex. Now, talking about those 61 million raised that were allegedly transferred by Daniel Borcado to finance the movie Dark Horse. At the request of Flávio Bolsonaro, what the federal police mainly intends to investigate is whether Daniel Borcado got anything in return. Or rather, if Flavio Bolsonaro did any kind of favor for Daniel Borcado or his team because of this transfer of 61 million reais. And this investigation was still waiting. The federal police was waiting for the Supreme Federal Court to decide who would be the justice assigned to this case. As you said, Minister Andre Mendonça was chosen, but before that, there was an inquiry. That's because this request for investigation came through a request made by Congressman Lindbergh Farias within the inquiry that led to the conviction of Eduardo Bolsonaro for obstruction of justice. He presented this in the inquiry because he believed that Eduardo Bolsonaro also acted internationally to try to finance this film. So, what now? Minister Alexandre de Moraes was initially assigned to the case, but first requested an opinion from the Attorney General's office. Paulo Gonet, the Attorney General of the Republic, believed that this transfer in this case would be more related to the investigation involving Banco Master. That's why the case should stay with Andre Mendonça. And then what? The final decision was left to the President of the Supreme Federal Court, Minister Edson Fachin, who made a statement yesterday. He then determined that the case should be assigned to Andre Mendonça because he is already the justice overseeing the Banco Master investigation. Congressman Lindbergh Farias filed an appeal requesting that the case in fact be assigned to Minister Flávio Dino. Minister Flávio Dino is overseeing this third branch, so to speak, of the investigation, which will deal with this alleged matter of financing entities linked to the production of the film Dark Horse. In practice, Natus, the expectation is that 3 lines of investigation will be opened.
Yeah, but it has to be open soon, right, guys? It has to be open soon because, for God's sake, really, for the love of Jesus, it should already be open. They should already be investigating. It was in May that The Intercept revealed this whole situation. It's already been 45 days, so this needs to be investigated. It should have happened yesterday, you know? They'll soon stall until the elections, but there's a catch. As I said, there's no way around it. If things don't move forward in the Supreme Federal Court, we're going to show more and more every day. You can be sure of that. And we are not going to accept this situation. There won't be another Lava Jato 2.0. This won't happen again. The truth will come out no matter who it hurts. And Flávio Bolsonaro, to me, he seems more like a partner of Daniel Volcar. That's the situation. And all of this needs to be dealt with, okay? So this is a very serious, very grave matter about Flávio Bolsonaro. Thank you. And the other point is this attack on our sovereignty together with the United States government. The United States wants to colonize Brazil again, to steal from Brazil. Thank you. And he is being supported by Bolsonaro supporters, notably by Eduardo Bolsonaro and Flávio Bolsonaro. And we cannot accept this. Sovereignty is not negotiable. Thank you. And this I'm saying, regardless of whether you are right-wing or left-wing, it doesn't matter. Sovereignty, our territory, our Brazil, our family, our world, our life, it's ours. And there's no one who should interfere, especially because he has a lot of problems to solve in his own country, and he doesn't solve them. Is he going to solve them here? That's nonsense. Come on. What kind of dirty trick is this? Federal Congressman Antonio de Paula gave a warning here about this situation. Pay attention.
The letter from Marcos Rubio to Flávio Bolsonaro, when he makes a hypocritical request for America not to impose tariffs on Brazil. Hypocritical because in reality, all these tariffs are against Brazil. It was a proposal from the Bolsonaro family against the Lula government affecting all of Brazil. It was just an electioneering proposal. Remember, I won't let you forget that Eduardo Bolsonaro said he didn't care either way. Whether this place would become a wasteland or not, as long as he could get his revenge. I won't let him get his revenge. Therefore, it was never about Brazil. It was always about them, about the Bolsonaro family, and that's a fact. That's a fact. Now, what draws attention in this letter is not the fact that Marcos Rubio says he will continue with these tariffs. We already knew that. What catches my attention is him thanking the presidential candidate Flávio Bolsonaro for making his government's transition available to an American team. What is this? A presidential candidate making a possible future transition of his government available to another country at the disposal of an American team. First, Brazilian laws do not allow for such an absurdity. This attack on national sovereignty. Folks, what are we discussing in this election from now on? With this madness and this declared subservience of the Bolsonaro family to Trump, what we're discussing is national sovereignty. Do you understand? National sovereignty. And this topic, it didn't start with Lula. It starts with a thinly veiled threat from the Bolsonaro family. How can you subject a government transition to another country? That's absurd. This is absurd. So pay attention to where we are heading, regardless of whether you like Flávio or not, whether you like Bolsonaro or not. But look where to what point? Where this family is taking the country. They accused Lula so much, and I'm not defending Lula here. Don't call me Lula's soldier. I'm a soldier for Brazil, for consistency and for the truth. They were the ones who accused Lula so much of protecting China and handing Brazil over to Chinese interests, and they never approved of that. But we have proof of their subservience to the Americans, and Marcos Rubio's letter makes that very clear.
Then you ask me, but Andre, what's the logic? Flávio Bolsonaro's logic, together with Eduardo Bolsonaro's, to make a deal like this, to try to make the deal, right? Because the United States didn't even accept this deal. They said that if Flávio won the elections, the transition team would answer to the United States here in Brazil. In exchange, he didn't want the tariff hike and all that. Everything they fought to have, which was the tariff hike, that whole situation, to try to bring down Lula. But it didn't bring him down. On the contrary, it made Lula rise even more. Then they tried to fix the mess and clean up the mess they made. That's when they made this kind of deal. You ask me, Andre, what's the logic behind such a deal? For God's sake, there's only one explanation. They don't care at all about our sovereignty, about the Brazilian people, about the well-being of our nation. They just don't care. What is it? For them, the only thing that matters is getting back to the presidency. To get back to the perks, to get back to the schemes like they apparently had with Daniel Vorcaro. To steal, to kill like they killed during the genocide of the pandemic, to get away with it. From jail. The only thing that matters to them is that to hell with the rest. They don't care about Brazil. They want to get back into power at any cost, no matter what it takes, even if it costs our sovereignty, our territory, and our security. It doesn't matter. They want power just for the sake of power. To stay out of jail because they're going to jail. Just like Bolsonaro is in prison. Eduardo Bolsonaro is already convicted. He's going to jail. Flávio Bolsonaro, his time will come too. He's going to jail. So they're desperate to get back to power. To see if they can stay out of jail and let the rest go to hell. That's the logic of the Bolsonaro family. And for that, they lie, attack, and do whatever needs to be done. Flávio Bolsonaro is there in Argentina, right? Then he went there to speak in front of Javier Milei's supporters, and Javier Milei himself saying that he's going to do the same as Javier Milei. Milei, Argentina, guys, is in total chaos. Argentinians are fleeing Argentina to come to Brazil Do you remember that story that Brazil was going to become Venezuela and all that and all that? Well, it turns out Argentina is the one that became Venezuela. He went there and said he'd do what Javier Milei did and win the elections. Guys, for God's sake, what the hell is this? After promising submission to Trump, Flávio Bolsonaro said he will align himself with Israel. In Buenos Aires, the senator used the event of pro-Israel conservative groups to attack Lula and promise alignment with Benjamin Netanyahu's regime, which is responsible for the killing of thousands of Palestinians. And he said more. He said he'll follow Javier Milei's government's approach. He will govern just like Javier Milei. Javier Milei carried out a labor reform where people will have to work 12 hours a day, where the boss will be able to pay their wages with food. Is that what Brazilians want? What madness is this? It's right here, Tico. Look here, pay attention.
To recognize the one who, together with my father, gave the first big push to this wave. It was President Javier Milei. He was the one who started all of this.
President Milei took office in Argentina. Then he keeps flattering Javier Milei and says that Brazil is worse off than Argentina. By the way, Argentina has never been better than Brazil. Argentinians are coming to Brazil. They're fleeing from Argentina. The situation there is that people are eating donkey meat because they can't afford to buy beef. It's turning into another Venezuela over there. Then he said he's going to govern and do the same as Javier Milei if he's elected. What is he talking about? Specifically, the labor reform they did there. Beating down, whipping the workers. Many are coming back to Brazil. They don't want to live or work there anymore. With the precarious situation and the abuse that's happening there in Argentina. So it's total chaos. These people are a disgrace. Meanwhile, Flávio Bolsonaro and the other Bolsonaro supporting groups are working to prevent the approval of the constitutional amendment to end the 6-day work week. Put it up there, for God's sake. End the 6-day work week already? For God's sake, people. But it looks like things are starting to move. Look here. See? End of the 6-day work week, Alcolumbre opens negotiations after a month of inaction and pressure from Lula's government. The proposal that provides for the end of the 6-day work week has been stalled in the Senate since May 28, waiting for a decision from the President of the House, who has called a meeting for this week. Davi Alcolumbre wants Lula's government to shield him, but Lula says he won't shield anyone. Davi Alcolumbre was implicated by Daniel Volcaro. Daniel Volcaro said he paid $30 million in bribes to Davi Alcolumbre. More than 150 million reais. Then after that, according to Malu Gaspar from Globo, he went to Lula to ask him to interfere with the federal police to protect him, and Lula said he wouldn't interfere. So what happened? He switched sides. He got Lula's veto of the sentencing guidelines measure overturned, and it did. In fact, today there's a constitutional challenge to the sentencing guidelines law, which should be voted on around August or September to decide whether there will be sentencing guidelines or not. It's in the Supreme Court. The law is suspended for now, but Lula's veto was overturned due to Davi Alcolumbre. Thanks to Davi Alcolumbre, for the first time in over 100 years, the president's nominee to the federal Supreme Court was rejected by the Senate, and that nominee was Jorge Messias, an evangelical. There was no reason at all to reject the guy. He even had the profile they like, and they rejected him. Why? Because Davi Alcolumbre was showing power to Lula because he wants political protection. And now he is blackmailing, apparently, the Lula government to approve the action and to decide whether or not to move forward with the proposed constitutional amendment to end the 6 days on, 1 day off work schedule. There has to be pressure. There has to be pressure, guys, because otherwise Davi Alcolumbre won't be able to move it forward. So this week he scheduled a meeting with the leadership. What does he have to do? He has to refer the bill to the Constitution and Justice Committee so that it can be processed in the CCJ, and the bill has to move through the process and then be approved after it passes the CCJ in the special committee and then approval in the full chamber. If there isn't processing, there won't be approval. And who is the only one who can start the process? It's him. starting the process, but he doesn't provide it. He's trying to blackmail the government. And the government won't give in, guys. There's no way the government will give in. Lula is not Bolsonaro. He interfered with the federal police to protect his sons, especially Flávio Bolsonaro, his allies, brothers-in-law, accomplices, perpetrators, co-perpetrators, and accomplices in crime. Lula won't do that. So we have to stay alert to this situation and take to the streets soon. Because this can't go on. Write it down. End the 6x1 work schedule now. And federal police, go after them, whoever it is. It doesn't matter. If they're right wing, if they're left wing, it doesn't matter. Go after the criminals. Especially the biggest criminal. Who? By all indications, Flávio Bolsonaro. Much love to you. Go after